Hey everyone, good, good day everyone. Thanks for joining November 13, 2025, LF Decentralized Trust Technical Advisory Council meeting. But before we get started, a couple of quick reminders. So we all know like these meetings are attended by participants from across organizations, and we'll have to abide by certain policies and governance and rules. And it's basically around saying it's just saying like we have to respect each other. We should be aware that there could be certain things sensitive to others, or maybe even from antitrust policy, because we'll have participants from across different organizations participating in these meetings, and we are aware of those information. So I think I covered kind of code of conduct and antitrust policy information in my ask. So moving on to the announcements for today, we have developer weekly newsletter that goes out to all the developers. They have subscribed, and not just the developers, but also others who have contributed in the past and those who have expressed interest. So this is a pretty large community. If you have any updates from your project, or if you want to communicate out regarding any of the or request for comments or the things that you have developed, you want people to start trying out, or you have some use cases that you want people to try out or build a POC, or try out your SDK. It could be any kind of topic that you have. Please make sure all you have to do is just leave a comment out, and the information that you are requesting or that you're wanting to communicate will be sent out to the large community. And quick reminders, tomorrow or like later today, depending on most likely tomorrow, is the last date for voting for the 2026 TAC term. So if you have still not done so, please do. And do communicate this among your circles in your project community within TSC of projects. And the voting for that would be done via Helio voting platform, and you will have to log in using your GitHub credentials. And that's it. The next announcement is about maintainer days. If you have not already done so, please do register at the earliest, so that it gives a sense of what can be planned during those maintainer days. And like if you have any objective or any goal that you want to achieve during those days, please also list that. I see right commenting, we have 84 votes out of 562 voters. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the historical data at hand, but it is typically the turnout is fairly low. So
Thanks, right. Please do communicate among your project teams, and whoever have voting ability, or they can check their status through the GitHub page. I don't have that link handy, but you can go there to validate your eligibility for voting. So before we move on to the next agenda item, is there any other announcements that you want to bring up? See none. So we'll move to the next agenda item for today, which is we'll have to review quarterly reports, which have been pending for a while now. I know in the past we have discussed if any quarterly report or any report which is open for 2 weeks, it would be accepted as it would be by default accepted as like TAC members have no comments on them, but I would request team to still review if you have not already done so. And before starting this meeting, I skimmed through all the pending reports. I did see there was one comment on Fabric, which was about requesting for additional maintainers for the OG project, as they call it. And I did not see much of other concerns across other reports, but I'll open it up for comments and questions.
I think this is an area where Fabric is not the first project to kind of run into it, and I think their questions were fairly reasonable. It was something that was being tussled with last week. How do you separate Fabric, the umbrella project, from what I don't remember who said Fabric Classic from Fabric X from. So that might be an area where the TAC could provide some guidance. Maybe not this week since we don't have quorum, but that's basically what they were asking for.
I'll make a note for next week's discussion. Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the next agenda item, because I don't see any other concerns, and unless any TAC members have any comments on the Fabric topic, we'll move to the next agenda item.
Is Arun, is there a written, is there an issue or something? I forget where the Fabric folks wrote up or made that request.
This would be in the pull request that they have raised, submitting their quarterly report, and this is in a comment.
Okay, can you throw that into the chat just for me so I can?
Sure.
Thank you.
I see right. We see it as well.
Yeah, that's the comment that JT&TI left. So
please look into this and come back with suggestions, or feel free to make offline suggestions. We'll bring this up in our upcoming call for discussion. And in moving to the next agenda item, in terms of overdue reports, I did reach out to all the projects, and I haven't. I did hear back from Identis, and they were about to submit. It's some miscommunication that has happened among their maintainers, so I'm sure they're going to submit one soon. So I did. Project maintainers did tell me that they will be submitting it very soon. I do not have a SLA or timelines as to when they will submit it, though. Hey, Matthew.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think that's useful feedback for us as the TAC in terms of the discussions we had about moving projects to dormant. That we talked last time about making sure people are given plenty of notice as to what's going to happen if the project report doesn't come in, and this sounds like a good example of where highlighting that has been really useful, and just highlighted to a project that there's been some miscommunication and someone's something slipped between the cracks. So I just wanted to mention that as a kind of an additional comment on the whole subject of when we move projects to dormant and what that process is.
Sure. Yep. Thanks, Matthew.
yeah, and I will, based on our experience with Bevel, I will say that we internally are now, it is a standing item on our weekly staff call to review the overdue reports to see if there's, in particular, the surprise was the active maintainer said Bevel can be archived. We archived it. We, the TAC, archived it. And then another group of maintainers who aren't on Discord were surprised this happened. So we're going to take a kind of a higher touch there as staff to make sure that we reach out to member companies that are contributing or using. So that's something that we're doing on our side to try to prevent that from happening again. But yeah, communication has always been a challenge.
I agree. This has happened also in the past where there were, for another project, we have seen interest from some of the community members who wanted to get involved. And they saw an opportunity to get started with the project given that technical barrier for their team to get onboarded. But yeah, and they were surprised as well that the project was moved. Maybe there's scope for us to start working in terms of when we think a project is kind of tending towards dormancy, we start communicating it out so that it is spread to the community as well, not just like informing to the maintainers, but also to the users and see what we hear from the users. I see Matthew raising hand.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Yeah, sorry. I think I wanted to agree entirely with that comment. I think there's an argument that more communication from the TAC and maybe staff, as it feels like we're approaching a project maybe moving to dormant. I think that does warrant an increase in communication effort, rather than just following through the processes outlined in the various LFDT project requirements. Because I think we live and breathe the process week in, week out. We have the calls every week, and I think we live and breathe that process, and we're very aware of it, and we're following it, fairly to the letter. But I think projects will be operating in a very different fashion. So they'll be heads down, kind of working on things. They might be working on some other things, and I think that does, further reinforce the need to be as proactive as possible as we approach a project being dormant.
Yeah,
I think I'm
it
just reinforcing.
yeah, it used to be homework for TSC members that they needed to either be on the project. I'm going to use the current terminology, even though that wasn't the terminology we were using at the time. Okay, because it's too hard to keep it straight. TAC members who were members of a TSC for a project were expected to keep that project apprised of what happened. For projects without a TAC member, it used to be homework that a member of the TAC, like once a month, would go to the main meeting for that group. That ended like 5 years ago, but perhaps that's something to investigate for next year to make sure that the TAC, even if it's just on a cycle, someone from the TAC is going, to your meeting, to your main meeting once a month. It doesn't have to be the same person every time. I don't know. That's a future thing.
I agree. In the past, TAC has discussed this option, and I believe it was also agreed upon. So I do have one comment to be made as well. I'm raising my hand virtually. So when a project is moving to dormancy, at least we expect coordination among maintainers within the project. It should not be surprised to subset of maintainers that a project is being moved to dormancy. So that kind of suggests that there is something not working within the project group. Maybe maybe the ways of working needs to be improved within the project. But I completely agree about communication to the larger community, not just from a maintainer's angle. Moving on to the, mm, I mean, among the overdue reports, I did not hear back from Iroha, but Identis did reach out that there was miscommunication among their maintainers and they will submit one soon. And when it came to TOIP, the Trust over IP community has been asking us, again, it was a request from them. The latest request is still that they are looking forward to guidelines from the TAC on what they can submit. This is also one of the topics that I wanted to talk about as we go through this year in a review. Maybe I'll bring that up in a while for discussion. So that's it about the quarterly reports, and we'll follow up with the upcoming reports. Firefly is due by today, and then Besu and Caliper would be due by next week. So without further delay, I would like to jump into discussion for today. So we'll start with the retrospection. And for the retrospection, the way I want to have this conversation, I know Matthew, you have some ideas. Not Matthew, maybe Enrique, you have some. Sorry, my bad. Give me 1 second. Yeah, and Enrique, I see you were having some ideas about how this can be run. Maybe first we will go through the year goals, and then we will jump into what has been achieved as we walk through the year goals, and then we'll jump into like what could have been done better, what went well this year, what did we not accomplish, or if there were any action items that for us. We'll bring those up as we progress. So to get started, how do we do this? So I do have notes on my machine. Maybe I'll go through each item one by one, and then we'll see which topic needs further discussion. So one of the major items that we had for this year was when we have standard projects like Trust over IP, how do we bring them and integrate within our community? So there were goals such as, do we need to define a new life cycle for them, or do we need to have like how do we establish connection with TOIP with rest of the projects, or do we need to connect them with some of the implementation efforts that could assist them in their standards work, or how do we even measure their progress? So there were all these kind of questions that came in beginning of this year. I have my own comments, but I want to hear from the TAC. What do you think has worked? What do you think has been worked on this effort so far? And what do you think has not worked so well? And where do we see opportunities for us to improve with respect to that? Dan?
So, I know we've talked a lot about, and we've done some work on tweaking the process for reporting. I think we still need to, and I plan on attending some of the Trust over IP steering committee meetings. But I think it's a question really. The life cycle stuff is much slower for standards and much more laborious. So it's not, we don't see the use, the changes as frequently, so it doesn't sometimes look like much is happening. And they also have not been using GitHub for their documentation or their recording their issues as a lot. So I think it's a bit of, for me, the standards work is understanding how the standards operate, better by sending an emissary from the TAC or bringing an emissary from Trust over IP into a conversation about this. And I'm sure there will be other standards that come to the LFDT, but this is a good opportunity, I think, to do some collaboration with this group and outreach to them. It's really hard to impose life cycle stuff on standards without including them in the conversation. So hesitate to say much more than that. We did suggest that we could create a new template for the standards group. But again, that would have to be done in collaboration with them, in my opinion.
I completely agree. And so a few other things that came in with this, and I completely agree to all the comments from Diane. So despite having, despite the efforts that the TAC is putting in, and maybe communication that is going on with the Trust over IP, there were few gaps that were identified throughout the year as well, right? For instance, the standards working group, they work in the different mode, they use different set of tools, and they may not be familiar with GitHub as we have for code contributions from other projects. So that was one other major finding. And asking the TOIP project to submit quarterly reports that was more oriented towards code kind of projects, it always kept them open in terms of, hey, what are you trying to measure? What are you looking for in a success metrics from store IP? And again, further going into the topic, in one of the previous common conversations or communications from TOIP group, they also communicated that they internally work or they do have several other working groups within the TOIP, and that's their ways of working. They have their own information gathering from those working groups and measuring whether what's happening across those. And so all these were kind of open, and then our templates are, even though like we spend time on templates, I feel there's still opportunity for us to improve in terms of what we can do better. And I know, Rama, like the topic of life cycle was from last year, but I would like to hear your thoughts on how do we even measure life cycle for such project, or is there an opportunity for TAC to spend time on such thing when it comes to standard project?
Yeah, clearly there is. I think one of the things we've seen this year, so I think the life cycle criteria were adopted at the end of last year or maybe in January, if I'm getting the dates right. What we've seen over the course of the year is that it wasn't. I mean, the criteria that were laid out weren't as easy to use and evaluate. In fact, they probably some of the criteria listed were not useful to evaluate because, like the LFX insights measures were just not accurate. So I think recently we removed those in a PR, and what we are left with is the OpenSS scorecard and some manual inspections. So broadly speaking, those are the two things we're doing. OpenSS scorecard is not suitable for non-code projects. I think it says that quite clearly. And a lot of the things that it measures, in fact, most of the things that it measures are relevant for code, like security, tracking security vulnerabilities, periodic releases, and such. And those are the main things we use for determining whether project is can be moved up or down the life cycle. So yeah, clearly we need something else, something that does not involve the OpenSS scorecard. What that is, I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely a topic the next TAC should investigate. The life cycle diagram itself, or rather the life cycle itself, I think the same set of stages ought to work for both code and non-code projects, unless I'm missing something. I think an incubation stage, a graduation stage, dormancy, and an archival probably represent the life cycle of a standards project as well. So yeah, I think we're good with that. But the criteria we use to transition between states needs a different template for projects like TIP.
Makes sense. Any other thoughts on comments on this? So I think responding to Rama, right? So there could still be some challenge for the TAC in determining this life cycle state. Um, it- so yeah, I think the criterias we'll have to define, and also in terms of how do we even measure, what metrics do we look into? I tried to search for evidences of that. I know such topics were brought up in the past, but I could not still find evidences of that. The metrics that we look into for our standard project. Any other thoughts and comments on this? And I see, like, at least there are a couple of action items for the TAC for the goal that was set beginning this year. So any comments on if TAC was able to assist in connecting UIP with rest of the community, or do you think such a requirement exists for standards project? If so, like, in what way can TAC assist them? It can be as simple as, for instance, like TYP did not have, let's say, somebody who was familiar with the GitHub pull request process, which was needed for submitting quarterly reports, right? So maybe there was an opportunity for TAG to connect them with somebody who could be interested in standards, as well as like a developer who wants to transition into that. Could TAG have done something to assist in that? Like, what else, in which other ways can TAG assist connecting TOIP with rest of the community? Matthew?
Yeah, I think it can be difficult to identify kind of clear examples where the TAC has kind of tangibly helped with that, at least in the relatively short period of time that Trust Over IP has been a project. I guess from my perspective, I think it feels similar to if you were to ask the same question of a non-spec project, like any of the the Web3 projects that are kind of producing and shipping tangible software. I think the TAC kind of involvement that I think I observe is a little less direct, like specifically linking up projects with possible potential users and so on, and a little more kind of slow burn, kind of generally raising the kind of awareness of that spec, and just it being part of the LFDT, increasing the audience who are aware of it. So I think it's quite hard to pin some very specific examples down, but then I do think it's, like I said, I think it's quite hard to pin very specific examples down for other projects. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure I've seen specific examples. I'm also not sure how often we would expect to be able to cite really kind of specific cases where that's been the case. I think that's, I guess, just my view from the point of view of how the TAC does benefit those projects and communities. that it's perhaps a little less direct and a little more indirect, a little more background, a little more kind of that slow burn effect. But I don't know if others have a similar view.
I agree. Mhm. Rama?
I can share my experience from a different standards group if people are interested. I don't know if that will inform how we adjudicate projects at TIP, but should I do that? So, okay, so thanks, Dan. So, for the past 4 years or so, I've been participating in IETF meetings. We've been so the IETF produces RFCs, the specs that we all use to implement various typically client server protocols, security protocols, anything to do with networking. So if you want to produce some kind of standards in a new area, or like we wanted to do for blockchain interoperability, uh, what's called a working group was created, and a working group sounds quite similar to a project at TIP. So what you do in the working group is this particular working group is called the Secure Asset Transfer Protocol. So you define a particular scope, and that scope gets written into that working group's charter. And that charter is a very important document because at every stage, or quite frequently, the progress of the group is measured against that charter. So the charter authorizes the members of the group and the general public to participate in a particular set of drafts, and those drafts are designated. So you can people can write other drafts that are seemingly part of the ambit of that group, but if it's not within the scope of the charter, it does not become like an official draft. So the these drafts keep getting worked on, and within the ITF, uh, once the chairs of the group deem that there's been enough brainstorming, or all the issues have been resolved, and there are nobody has any quibbles, then it goes to a different stage where these drafts get reviewed by committees. There's more proofreading and stuff, and then eventually, at some point, it becomes an official RFC. We are kind of close to that now. And these things usually take about 4 to 5 years, I think. Uh, so once drafts become RFCs, then several things could happen. If there are a lot of other topics that were not part of the original scope, then they could get the group could do a rechartering, change the scope or expand the scope, and move on to brainstorming new drafts, which then may become RFCs a few years down the line. And or if people feel like the work is done, that particular group has solved the set of problems they wanted to solve, then I guess the group just disbands after that. So this is kind of the life cycle of a standards group within the ITF. You have a begin with just some ideas and some goals. You have to justify the need for a standard in the area that you're investigating, and then you're actively brainstorming, and at some point the brainstorming is deemed to have reached maturity, and after that, either your work is done, or you move on to new things. So, yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Rama, for the detailed overview. I do have a lot many questions. Um, I wish like we could form a task force around this topic and invite more experienced leaders like yourself into the forum and learn from them or ask them, in order for us to have a better view of how to even govern around these projects, right? just from the way you communicated, it seems like the commitments to such projects are kind of long from participants. So once they start getting involved, it kind of their commitment is like um, there to the project for several years, and at least until like the the comments that they have put in goes in through that review cycle and gets into that standard process, right? Does all of this? Quick question. I know, like, I don't want to clog this meeting with this topic, but um, does any of this, or like, do any of these processes or stages have set timelines, or they are just open? And how does somebody define like now is the end of this process and we should move to the next stage? And if
So,
so, do you
sorry.
think like sorry?
No, please finish your thought. I thought you finished.
Oh, yeah. So continuation of that, right? If so, like, what would those stages be? And do you think it's relevant for us to um, have measurements in terms of what those stages are and how many such RFCs are open? Like, so that was the continuation of that question.
So the stages in the ITF are specific to the draft maturity. There are so the a group itself initially is even before it becomes accepted as an official working group. The members of the group form what's called a birds of a feather group. I think that's what it's called. It's called BOF. So you usually ask for a BOF at one of the official IETF meetings, and there are 3 of those every year. And in the BOF, you justify the need for standards in that area, and and there is usually an open vote. And if you pass, then you get to be an official working group, and then you work on drafts. The drafts themselves go through particular stages. So initially they just drafts that are being that are subject to constant change, and at some point the chairs deem that they call it a stage of last call. Last call means it's like a last call for any comments, and if there aren't any, then it moves to official review by ITF officials. And then after a couple of rounds of proofreading and editing, it becomes an official RFC. So those are the stages a draft goes through. It's kind of different from the stages a group goes through. Now, one of the things I forgot to mention earlier was a proof point that the ITF looks for is working code. So people look for actual code that has implemented the specifications in the draft. So in this case, the SATP working group was looked at Cacti, and Cacti, as many of you may know, has an implementation of the SATP protocol. So that was a strong indicator that the specifications were mature enough for adoption. Sorry, I see Diane has had her hand up for a long time.
No, I'm actually listening, so continue, and then I'm going to add something at the end, I think.
No, I'm done. Just wanted to make those points.
Yeah. So I think so the life cycle stages of working on a standards could be documented and better and all that. But in terms of metrics, one of the other things that I've been thinking about is the number of participants in these working groups, the diversity of those participants, and the reviewers of these when things are going out. So tracking those so that we can see that there's sufficient participation in the groups besides moving through the stages. So, and I'm not sure, like right now with like Trust over IP and other standards groups, they're using mailing lists and other things, and then it's not really tracked well, or in a way that we can easily, analyze it using common tools. But I, I, I would really like to have some, besides how they're progressing through the stages for their standard development, I'd like to be aware of how much actual participation they have from adopters from the technology folks who are working on it uh, in their standards. So part of the reporting back to the TAC, I'd like to see some of that as well. So I think we could come up with a nice life cycle incubation in a working group, public drafts, candidates, and final approvals, and then the normal maintenance, retirement, and different governance processes would all show the maturity of the standard. But I think you want to make sure that the standards being developed aren't being developed in a vacuum, and that they have a healthy community around them as well. So I think that was the life cycle stuff is one thing that we need to work on, and adapting our current code-based ways to working with standards groups. And I'm happy to help with that. But I also would like to see a better way for them to report who's participating in their community, so that we're not just developing something in a vacuum.
Thank you, Dan. I agree. So based on all the things that I have heard so far, definitely things have been, I mean, I would not call it better than last year, but I would say the TAC has learned enough enough in the sense, TAC has learned sufficient information to get started in the direction that is needed for governance around such projects. And it is time for TAC to or take actionable items, right? Beginning maybe end of this cycle, or at some point, to get started on those actionable items. I think that's how I would maybe phrase it for against that particular goal. And I'll quickly jump to the next goal that the TAC had for this year, and this is around helping. So there are two aspects, right? This is around helping maintainers. So when I say helping maintainers, one angle is when people start contributing to projects, do they have clear guidelines from each project of how they can progress through? And if they are interested to eventually become maintainers, do they have all the tools and information needed within the project? Or have we set that standard across all the projects? Do we mandate such things from each project that is part of LFTT? That is one angle to it. The other angle is, how do we even remove that barrier or friction from somebody like entering into LFTT? Um, Not necessarily for first time contribution, but also like in order for them to become maintainers if they were looking forward to one. What barriers or challenges do they see as of today? Um, and then there's third aspect to it, right? Like, can we build and develop certain things so that new and first time maintainers have enough information, sufficient tools for them to continue progressing when they see other projects growing to a higher level? And how can they meet all the standards, or how can they meet similar um, similar standards as other projects and still continue contributing to what they want to contribute? So there are all these three angles that we can look into. Any comments or topics on this topic? I know we did have a contributor ladder task force this year, and Dan helped us put up a really good guidelines that we should be following. But I want to hear comments on how are we progressing against this goal.
The silence is deafening. I have the contribute site is a great place to do some of this work to showcase it if we develop it. There's a whole maintainer section there. And I think I've added in stuff on onboarding new projects, onboarding maintainers. Uh, I- but I think we could be at rather than asking maintainers to create stuff at each project level, if we can keep it at a higher level so that it's LFDT and generic enough so that the maintainers can use those instructions, that would be more, I don't know, maybe more efficient than trying to get the all of the projects to create their own maintainer ladders. And but that's just why that sort of the why I did it at the LFDT level or wanted to do it at the LFDT TAC level as opposed to push it down into each of the projects. Though each of the projects could host their own maintainer ladder growth, you know, systems if they wanted to.
I agree. Any other thoughts or comments on what we could have done better for this year, or where do we still see challenges in these aspects from maintainers? Could be like the current maintainers or the first time maintainers, or like where can we assist them, or for somebody who want to be maintainers, what has been barriers? Rama?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is a great suggestion, but I just wonder if you have any data from the broader community and on what intimidates them, to making any contributions. I wonder if polls could help. If you could ask some well-chosen questions, we'd get to know more.
Sure.
And anecdotally, Rama, I think maybe in the Hyro Ledger project, for our core components, it's the complexity that's intimidating. How to get up to speed on, and make viable contributions has been really the most, I think, the toughest thing for people that anecdotally I've heard. And I think that's just more training, more getting started guides, more, architectural diagrams being made available. But still, that takes time and effort, and most of the maintainers are heads down doing the work rather than developing getting started guides or architectural diagrams, to help new contributors. So things that pop into mind are like more pair programming kind of projects to work on things, more hackathons that grow contributors that are that educate them on projects that are complex because it's easier on some of our sub projects like the SDKs and other things to get involved and to learn how to contribute to the Python SDK, for example, or the JavaScript SDKs. But the core projects here are some of them are incredibly complex. So I think that's really the showstopper. And the other piece, I think, of the puzzle is getting the resources to actually do development and and having the servers and boxes to actually debug and do that kind of work. And test nets there in our case and other places, but it's still a lot to get started and not an easy thing to enter. And I'm guessing that that's reflected across the other projects as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. I think, as you say, projects are quite complex. Even Cacti is as well. We have tried to provide accessible kind of hello world guides and even those can prove somewhat challenging for people. But if they, yeah, I mean, so that is one thing. Yeah, you're right. I mean, having good Hello World get started guide, and I guess good first pointing out good first issues. I think that's another thing we've been encouraging. Which would those issues being some very small tractable issues, which for which you don't need to understand the full system. Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, in this case, it's more about getting the various projects maintainers to do these things, right, or to offer these things. I think once that happens, contributors may feel like yeah, they can start contributing. Yeah.
I concur. I do plus one to that, but have you also considered any comments or thoughts on any friction point that exists for current maintainers? Uh, I know like there are projects which have a vast set of diversity, but there are other projects who want to thrive and they're doing their best, and but they do not have that diversity. But do they have, I mean, are they experiencing any friction points in continuing their contributions with LFTT? For example, I know Solang is one project. I'm not saying like they are in need of help, but the way the project reports have been quoted so far is like they're doing their ambitious visions and goals that they have against their project that they want to execute, and those have been executed. And for them, especially, the mentorship program has been really helpful. And all the mentees who have been participating in the past, they have continued their contributions or participation with the project, and that's a boost for them. I know like we brought in new projects as well this year, and um, I'm sure like the onboarding process has been smooth for them, but uh, for such ambitious projects who want to do something and they have their vision set, is there any other friction points that we can look into to eliminate? Here none, but I believe this is a topic that we can um, discuss further in in ways in which we can improve maintainers, um, like their experience being within the LFTT community. I can continue with other goals that we have set for this year, but I also want to do a time check that we have a couple of minutes left. But I don't want to switch to a new topic or like discuss new goal. In this couple of minutes, I want to open it up for comments. I hear none. So we'll wrap this meeting for now, but we will continue goal discussion and what we have done, and also probably the retrospection for the year itself in next TAC meeting.
Thanks, Arun.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.